Whether you're a complete beginner who has never touched Blender before, or you have some Blender experience and just want a short and fun exercise, you're in the right place. My name is Josh Bartels with 3 Division, and in the next 24 minutes, we are going to learn how to make this pepperoni pizza from scratch. Let's go. When you open up Blender, this is the first thing you're going to see. This is called the 3D viewport. This up here is called the outliner, and this right here is the properties panel. So this will give you access to any details of objects that are in your scene here in the 3D viewport. Now, in order to begin, we need to delete all of these objects that are existing in our viewport now. So select all of them and hit X on your keyboard to select delete. Now they are gone. To build our pizza, we are going to use a cylinder. So go up here to this add button, select mesh and cylinder. Now we need to scale this cylinder down to flatten it out a little bit in order to make our pizza crust. So hit S on your keyboard, and then you'll see that you can move your mouse up and down or away from the center of the scene and scale this cylinder up or down. What we want to do though is constrain the scale to only scale on the Z axis. So hit Z on your keyboard and you'll be able to move it only up and down. Then let's type in 0.05. And we'll start there for the thickness of our pizza crust. In the 3D viewport, in order to navigate, you can scroll up and down on your mouse wheel to zoom in and out. You can click and drag with your mouse wheel or the middle mouse button in order to pivot around the objects in your scene. You can also hit Shift and middle mouse button to move along the scene in one plane. I think that our pizza is still just a little bit thick. So let's hit S and then type in the number 0.5Z. And that will constrain it on the Z-axis and scale it down to half of its current height. Hit enter and that transformation will be applied to our mesh. Now we are good to go. Now before we start editing, I want to do one more thing because it's going to be important later. With that object selected, and you know when an object is selected because it has an orange outline, hit Control A and then apply the scale. Select the scale options. That's important for the steps we're about to take. Hit Tab to move into edit mode, or you can go up here to this little drop down at the top left to change the mode from object mode to edit mode. In edit mode, we begin to edit the actual mesh itself. I want to switch to something called face select mode because right now we are in vertex select mode, which allows us to select the individual points that make up this mesh. But I want to go up here to face select, or you can hit the number 3 on your keyboard in order to switch modes as well. And then I want to select this top face. We're going to hit I on the keyboard for the inset operation, and then you can see that we can shrink this selection and kind of create another cut in the middle of that face. So I'm just going to pull it down something like this because we're imagining that this outer edge is actually the crust, and that looks pretty good. Now with that same face selected, I want you to hit E on the keyboard, drag down until you can see how it pops underneath the other face and would even go all the way out the bottom. We want to just pop it down just underneath there and then pull it back up a little bit. Left click to apply, tab to change back to object mode, and here's our pizza crust. We're good to go. If you want to add a little bit of height to your pizza crust, then you can go in here, alternate select one of these little edges here on the side, and you can hit G and then Z to grab and move your crust up and down and adjust it to wherever you think looks good. Tab back out of edit mode now. Go over here to this little wrench. It says modifiers. Click add modifier, generate bevel. Let's change the segment over here to segments 2. And then now we've kind of got a little bit of a pie crust shape coming together. Let's tab back into edit mode. I'm going to select this face here, hit I for inset, and we're just going to add a bit more geometry to our scene. Let's do that I for inset another time and just kind of add another cut. Then we're going to go to this bottom face, do the same thing, hit I, go about 1/3 of the way in, I, another 1/3, and then left click to apply. Now tab back out of edit mode and we need to apply one more modifier. Add, generate, subdivision surface. Change the levels in the viewport up to 2, right click in here, shade smooth, and that's not looking too bad. Now you can see that we have a sharp ridge on the top of our pizza, and if that's the case for you, it has to do with the amount of bevel that we have applied, so I'm going to dial this back to something like 0.02, and that way the amount of bevel is not causing that sharp line there at the top. Now let's add our pizza sauce. Hit Shift and A on the keyboard, select mesh, and then circle, and you can see the faint outlines of a circle here. If you hit G on the keyboard and then hit Z on the keyboard as well, you can constrain the movement up, and you can see it's just an empty circle. If I hit Tab or go up here and select edit mode, and then switch to my vertex select mode with this button here or with a 1 on my keyboard, then you can see I have mesh, but I don't have a face. So what we need to do is have everything selected. You can do that with click and drag, or you can hit A on your keyboard to select everything, hit the F key, and now it adds a face to that mesh. I'm going to tab back out of edit mode now, grab this, hit Z to constrain my movement on the Z, and just pop it up just above my crust. This is our sauce. Let's hit S on the keyboard to scale it in just a touch so that it's inside the crust edge so that we can't see the edges of the sauce. And then we need to create the cheese. Hit Shift and D on this while you have that circle selected, and now we've got another duplicate circle. Hit Z on the keyboard to constrain the movement up, and then just bump it maybe just above the pizza for now, and hit S and scale it just inside the surface of that pizza. Now, so that we can see things more clearly, I'm going to go to this drop down, select random from this color option, and now we have 3 different colors, and that allows us to see this cheese mesh more clearly. I'm going to hit G on the keyboard, hit Z to move it down, and then move it down till it pops through the sauce, move it back till it pops on top. Now I'm going to go into edit mode and edit this cheese. Hit tab to move to edit mode, hit E for extrude, and we're going to extrude this face straight up to give our cheese just a little bit of thickness. Actually, let's make just a very thin slice on top. Hit E again and make it a little fatter, but then this time hit S on the keyboard to scale it in as if the cheese is kind of piled up more in the center. Now I'm going to tab out of edit mode, and with this setup selected, I'm going to add a subdivision surface modifier. And now you can see it's made it a little bit more dense. I'm going to change the levels in the viewport to 2, and then let's tab back into edit mode again, and I want to just add a bit more vertices here in the center part of the cheese. I'm going to select this face with face select mode, I, and then that should do it. Okay, so now we've got a nice pile of cheese on top. I'm going to right click on this mesh, shade smooth, and that'll give us kind of a smooth edge to this cheese. Now we need the pepperonis. I'm going to select the sauce again, Shift D, hit Z to pull it up, and then let's scale this. And when we hit S on the keyboard to scale, before you click or move or do anything else, just type in 0.1 so that it's only 10%, and that should be better. Yep, that's good. Let's focus on our pepperoni with the period key. I hit period, now I've got my pepperoni. I'm going to tab into edit mode with the whole thing selected. I'm going to hit I again, go all the way down kind of to the middle here. I'm going to Control R and add what's called a loop cut. And you'll see that as I move my mouse around, I can cut different areas, but it's going to cut this face loop in half. I'm going to left click to apply it, right click to apply the position of the cut, and then I'm going to select this outer edge loop by hitting alternate and selecting any one of those edges. Hit G on your keyboard, Z again to constrain the movement on the Z, and we want to flare this up just a little bit. We're creating that kind of pepperoni, how it kind of bends up when it's cooked. Hit 2 on the keyboard, select this interface loop by selecting any one of those edges, Control B to bevel, and you'll see a bevel kind of performs this bevel operation between these 2 sets of face loops. I'm going to scroll up on my mouse wheel to add 1 additional cut, and then just move it somewhere about there to make the cuts even, or as even as possible, and then left click. And now we have something resembling a pepperoni. Let's apply the scale, Control A, select scale. Let's add another modifier, generate, solidify. Let's change the modifier's offset to 1 instead of -1. And then let's change the thickness from 0.01 to 0.005. Cut that thickness in half. Now let's right click, shade smooth, and we have a pepperoni. We want to scatter this pepperoni across the face of the cheese, and in order to do that, we're going to tell Blender to allow us to snap directly to the faces of other objects. So go up here to this little magnet, and if you click it, it will enable a snap. If you click the drop down, let's change the snap type to targeting faces and to affecting move and rotation. And then let's go back to our mesh, hit G on the keyboard, Z to constrain the movement on the Z, and you'll see it just kind of snap down to the face of that cheese. And then I'm going to go to my overhead view with the number pad 7, and with this enabled, I'm going to hit Shift and D and just start duplicating these pepperonis around here on my scene. I'm going to delete that one, grab this one, move it over a little bit, move this one, and then you can just scatter the pepperonis across the surface of your cheese pizza as you see fit. Go back in then and make sure that all of them are not cutting into the cheese like these couple are. All you have to do is grab them from a different angle and try to ensure that they're in a position where they're not being snapped to the bottom side of the cheese mesh. And there we go. Our pizza is basically ready in terms of the geometry. Now we need to start talking about the surfaces of this pizza. But before we work on the surfaces, we need to actually create some sort of light to be able to see the mesh and create a plane for it to sit on. So I'm going to hit Shift and A. Let's add a plane. Let's turn off this snap feature up top so that it doesn't snap to surfaces of other meshes. I'm going to scale it up a little bit, just big enough that it's kind of huge. And then let's grab it and then again constrain the movement on the Z and move it underneath the pizza. Perfect. Now let's add a light. Shift A, go down to light. Let's hit area, hit G on your keyboard, Z to constrain it along the Z again, G to move it on the Y, type in the letter Y, and then just move it back a little bit. If I switch to rendered mode, you'll see that it is lighting up this area. I want it to light up the pizza, so I'm going to hit R to rotate, hit X to constrain the motion of the rotation on the X-axis, and then just move my cursor around until I'm aiming right here at the pizza. Apply it by left-clicking, and we are good to go. Let's change the power of this light from 10 watts, and you go over here to this properties panel, change the power from 10 watts to something like 250. There we go. Now we're lighting up the pizza. I'm going to grab it, move it up just a little bit, maybe just adjust the position a little bit. And then let's ensure that we cannot accidentally select this stuff in the background by selecting the light and the background together. I'm going to hit M on the keyboard, select new collection, type in scene, hit enter, and now up here in my outliner, I'm going to twirl down this collection, select my scene collection, select the restriction toggles, turn on this toggle, and then now I can see this little cursor. If I select it, now I cannot select that object. I can only select the objects of my pizza, which is what I want to have happen so that I can't accidentally change the settings of my light. Now, one more thing I want to do, I want to switch my render engine. So go to this little camera icon, select this drop down, select cycles, and we're ready to go. Let's start with the crust. Select your pizza crust and go over here to this little material properties panel. It looks like a little ball. Hit new, and then let's select that material.001 text. I'm going to type in now crust. I'm going to hit enter, and we're good to go. Now let's switch over to our shading editor. Click this button at the top that says shading, and then we have a couple of windows. We have the window over here for the file browser, we have an image editor, and we have our shader editor. Let's zoom in out here on our pizza. Let's change the view mode from this material preview to rendered mode. That way we can see what we're doing. I'm going to move this window down just a bit. I'm actually going to combine these two, right click, join areas, and select over here so that it moves and we have the whole scene available to us. And then in my image editor, I'm going to drag a set of colors that I have selected for the different elements of the pizza so that we have those accessible to us as we're choosing colors here in our shader editor. So with the crust selected, I'm going to change the color of the pizza crust here to something along this. Let's go with this darker brown color. And then what I need is what's called a noise texture. Select add, texture, noise texture. I'm going to change the scale to 8. I'm going to change the detail to 0, and I'm going to leave the rest of the settings where they are now. And then we're going to drag out from this little factor dot, and you're going to see it has this plus icon. When I let go of my left click, you have a bunch of different options, but it really is just a search bar. So type in here the words color ramp if you don't already see the color ramp FAC available. Now that's going to plug the factor of the noise texture into the color ramp, and I'm going to plug this color right here into the base color, and now it looks like the color has totally changed, which is just fine. So I'm going to click this little color node here at the end. We've got two little arrows that indicate different colors. If I click that little square, then I have the option to change the color here. I can change this eyedropper. I'm going to select this color for my crust, and I'm going to select this one and then select this other color for my crust. And if you want to use the exact same colors I'm using, you can see the hex numbers right here. If you copy that number and type it into your hex value, then you'll have the exact numbers I'm working with. Now I want to change the color ramp from linear to constant, and then I just want to drag these closer to one another to begin creating some sort of variation in the colors. And you can see how we're getting a nice little variegated look on this crust. That's exactly what we want. And then we need to duplicate this color ramp, Shift and D to duplicate, drag this factor into the factor, click and drag out from this color, and then we're going to type in bump, and you've got 4 options. We want to select bump height so that it plugs itself into the height value of this bump node, and then you'll see it's got a purple normal output, and there's a purple normal input on this node too. I'm going to click and drag from there to apply it, and now you can see we've got a little bit of height detail showing up on our pizza crust, but I don't want it to be that strong. So I'm actually going to dial this back to something like 0.35. And then we have one more thing we need to do. I'm going to crank up what's called the subsurface on the material. So twirl down this little option. I'm going to bump this up to 1. And then let's leave the scale here at 0.05. That should be just fine for the pizza crust. Let's move on to the sauce. Select the pizza sauce. I'm going to hit this new button to add a new material. And in this little material name, I'm just going to call it sauce. And once again, I'm going to need a noise texture. So let's go add texture, noise, select it here. We're going to change the scale to 25 and the distortion to 2. And then we're going to drag out from here and type in bump. And we want the height again. And then drag this normal and plug it in right there. Now you can see we've got a much rougher looking surface, but our color is wrong. So let's get some sauce color. I'm going to hit this eyedropper, select this darkest color we have up here, and then allow you to see the hex value again if you want to follow along. This doesn't look quite right. One, the strength is really high, and so we need to back that off. I'm going to back it off to something like 0.1, and then we're going to change the roughness value down to something like 0.2. And now we've got some shiny sauce on our mesh. I'm going to select one of these pepperonis and hit new. And then I'm going to select the material name, type pepperoni. I'm going to grab this color, this other red color that we have, and then I'm going to go to the subsurface, and I'm going to change the weight up to 1. I'm going to change the scale to 0.2. Actually, let's just go to 0.1. That would probably be enough. And then let's actually add another noise texture. Hit add, select texture, noise texture, drop it here. And then let's change the scale of this one to something like 3 for now. And let's plug this factor into a color ramp node once again. Let's click and drag this color up here onto the base color for now. And I'm going to zoom in on the pepperoni that I have selected so that we can see the effect. I'm going to move this closer and move this one closer. Change the interpolation to constant. I'm going to change this dark one from being perfectly black to being something here in this range. And then let's change the color here to be something a little bit lighter, something in a value range of, let's say, 0.4. And let's check the value on this one. The value is 0.0. I want 0.15. Okay? And then what we're going to do is plug this into the roughness and disconnect it from the base color. And that's just going to help drive a reflection map to look like the pepperonis have been cooked and that they've got grease on them. So let's push and pull these back and forth to one another, and that should work just fine. Now let's apply this material to all of the pepperonis. To do that, I'm going to go up here. I'm going to select what I think are all of the pepperonis. I'm going to shift select from the circle, and you can see we've actually selected the cheese, so I don't want that. Let's start here. There's a pepperoni all the way down here, and that's all of our pepperonis. I want to shift and select my pepperoni that I have the material on last. I'm going to hit Control L on the keyboard, link materials. One more material to do for our pizza. Let's select the cheese, and then let's hit new once again. I'm going to select the name, type in cheese, hit enter. This one is a little bit more complicated, so what we're going to do is say Shift and A. I'm going to search for a Voronoi texture, or you can go to the add and then go to texture and type in the word Voronoi. There it is. That's what we want. For this one, we'll need another color ramp. So drag out, type in color ramp, hit enter. And then now we want to add actually a third color. We want 3 different blends for the cheese. This first one, I'm going to use this color. I'm going to, for the middle one, select this color here. And then for the last color, I'm going to select this one here. And if you want to see the hex values, I'll show them to you now. Here they are. There's the hex value for this one. And here's the hex value for the middle. And the hex value for the last one. I'm actually might end up bumping up these colors and changing them a little bit. This one I think needs to be a little bit more yellow, but we'll see how it looks once we get it applied. Now let's plug this color ramp into the base color and see how things are shaping up. Now you can see it's all swirly and blended. We don't want that. Let's change this from linear to constant, and then let's begin cranking these down. I'm going to move this one to a position of something like 0.2. Let's move this one to something like 0.4 for now, and then this last one to something like 0.6. Now notice I'm not typing these values into the color, I'm typing them here into the position of those individual markers on the color ramp. Now you can see that this isn't nearly big enough. We need to change the details of our Voronoi. So I'm going to scale this up to something around the neighborhood of 25, maybe 23, 24. Now we're getting kind of a good look of our bubbly cheese. You can see that as we move out to the edges of this mesh, it's getting smashed, and that's because we have wrong mapping. Here's how to fix that. Go over here, go to Add, Input, select Texture Coordinate. Now we need another one, select Add, and then we want to go to Vector and Mapping. Now if we plug in Object from this texture coordinate into the mapping section of the vector, and then the vector purple node into this vector node here on the Voronoi, well, now you can see it's applying it correctly to the mesh. Let's go ahead and bump our scale back just a little bit. We can adjust this as needed later too. We don't have to have it all in sync now. So now we need to create what's called a bump map. So I'm going to select this, Shift and D, duplicate it and move it down. And then let's go ahead and drag this distance node into the factor of this color ramp. Go out of here into what's called a bump node again. Go down to height, select enter. We're going to click and drag from that normal up to this normal, and now you can see that we're affecting the height. Let's change this to black and white color. So I'm going to turn the saturation down on every one of these colors that we have here on our color ramp. And once we've got them desaturated, I'm going to change this brown one to a value of 0.6. I'm going to change this one to a value of 0.3, and then this one here to a value of 0.1. And now what we need to do is change this from constant to something like ease. And then let's back this off and back these off a little bit and back this one off just a touch. And what this does is create our bubble effect of the pizza bubbling up as it's being cooked. And so let's dial the strength back just a little bit so it's not overly powerful and doesn't lose the effect. And then let's go ahead and do one last thing. Let's change the roughness of this cheese pizza to give it a little bit of realism. I'm going to click these two nodes, drag them a little bit out of the way, duplicate our initial color ramp, do the same thing we did with the colors here. I'm going to back them all out of being saturated, make them all black and white values. And then starting here, this is going to do a similar thing as what happened down here. We're going to start with something that's a little bit darker. Let's say a value of 0.5. And then we're going to do a value of 0.35. And then we want to select this last one, and we'll make this last one a value of something like 0.15 and see how that looks. Now let's plug this color part into the roughness socket here on our main shader. And what that does is it makes the bubbles not as reflective as the cheese itself. One last thing, once again, we need to do, since this is food and we want it to be a little bit translucent, we need to change the subsurface. So let's bump the weight up to 1. Let's bump the scale up to 0.2. And then to get rid of the greenish hue, let's change it from random walk to Christensen Burley, and that will give us the effect that we're looking for. And now we have a beautiful pepperoni pizza ready to go. Now, before we render this, I just want to mention that we dive deeper into everything that I've showed you today and more in our Beginner's Guide to Blender course. So if you're looking to learn in a more structured way, be sure to check out our website. All right, now let's finish the pizza. Let's switch back to this layout mode and let's begin making this ready for you to show off. Let's add a point light, hit Shift A, point, grab to move, but we can't grab it because it's in our scene collection. We need to hit this little cursor there so that we can actually play with it. Let's select the point light over here, hit G, Z on the keyboard, G, Y to move it forward. Let's change the power of this point light to something like 100. Let's change the color of it to something a little more orange. Let's do the same thing with our area light, give it a little more orange so that it looks almost like we're in an oven here. Let's select the background that we have and give it a more contrasty look. So I'm going to just call this one BG. I'm going to change the color over here to something blue. That way we've got nice contrast for our pizza. I'm going to add a camera, Shift and A. Let's add camera. I'm going to move somewhere here that looks nice, and then hit Control, Alternate, and number pad 0. And then now you can see we've got our camera framed around our pizza. We need to zoom the camera out a bit though. So let's go over here to the camera settings, type in something like 35 to have a 35mm camera. You can see that in this top corner of the frame, it's still kind of dark. So I'm going to grab this light, hit G and Y just to push it back so that we've got a nice fall off on the whole thing. And let's hit F12 on our keyboard, or you can go up here to render and render image. And that's going to render out the final image of your pizza that you can go on and share with other people. Hit this image button, save as, save it somewhere on your computer. Then you can upload it to social media and show your friends. If this was useful to you, please do us a favor and hit that subscribe button and share your finished renders over in our Discord server. We would love to see them.